Hello and welcome to the Beauty Chronicles. I'm Meredith Jones, a professor of gender studies who loves popular culture.
And I'm Carla, Meredith's trusty sidekick.
In these Beauty Chronicles, we discuss all sorts of fascinating and sometimes grotesque things to do with cosmetic surgery, media, popular culture, celebrity, and much more.
So,
Bianca Censori.
Yes.
Carla. Shall I go through the agenda? Because I have been deep diving with Bianca for a couple of weeks now, and there's a hell of a lot to say.
Yeah, let's do an agenda, sure.
All right, let's do an agenda. So we're going to just do who is she, what we know about her biographically, the marriage with Ye or Kanye West, their or her increasing exhibitionism and the way that's kind of developed. We're going to talk about her silence, her verbal silence. Going to talk about that Grammys moment and a few post-Grammys moments. Going to talk about gender and race. Going to talk about all of the public concern around her. But also the kind of psychological aspects of that public concern, which are really, really interesting. And we're going to talk about pantyhose. That is one of the strangest words in the English language, I think, pantyhose. We're going to talk about artists who work with pantyhose. And we're going to talk about things like what showing off is, and what art is and the difference between those things and anything you want to talk about, Carla.
Okay. I'll just interject with, my popular opinions.
All right, lovely. You're
or
unpopular.
Or popular, I don't know.
Who knows?
My own opinions.
Well,
I do have one question before we start. Is when did you first become aware of Bianca? And was it before she was with Kanye? Or was it sort of subsequent to you being Kanye being on your radar because Kim had married him?
Yeah, so the first I was aware of Bianca was that she was Kanye's wife, and I'm doing quote marks around wife because that was the way it was reported, almost as very soon after Kanye and Kim had officially divorced. There was a lot of media about Kanye's new wife, in quote marks. The reason she was in quote marks was because, unlike Kanye's marriage to Kim, there'd been no announcement, no, as far as we know, no celebration, not even a ceremony, none of it.
Maybe not, maybe not even a wedding.
Yeah, well, that was the speculation. It turns out that they are legally married and they were legally married, so people are leaving the quote marks off now. Okay. But before she kind of came into the public eye as his wife and public companion, she was really unknown. She'd certainly been working for one of his companies for several years, but she was not known as a public figure at all.
What was she working as?
Something like head architect. I've got it written down, and I'll tell you when we get to it.
As in a building architect?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she has a master's in architecture.
Okay.
So I'll tell you a bit about her.
Yeah.
She is Italian-Australian from Melbourne. She's 30 years old. By Italian-Australian, I mean that, like many, many people we would describe as Italian-Australian, she wasn't born in Italy. She was born in Australia, but her parents were born in Italy. Her dad came when he was a child, as was very common with his generation, and his parents settled, I think, with their 6 children in Melbourne. Now, he has an interesting history. His name's Leo. the dad.
Mm.
He was convicted in the 80s, so well before Bianca was born. He was convicted of various illegal gambling crimes and of heroin possession, and he was jailed in Melbourne.
Mhm.
His brother, whose name is Eris, was actually convicted in the 80s of murdering a waiter in Perth. Now, in the early 80s in Australia, capital punishment was still legal. And
Mhm.
so Eris Bianca's uncle, was given the death penalty.
Mm.
He was going to be hanged, but hanging was abolished in 1985. I don't know how long he spent in jail for the murder, but he's now on lifetime parole, and he does appeal that on occasion. And as far as I can see, it's always knocked back. He's still on lifetime parole. Obviously, and some listeners to this podcast know that I'm from Melbourne, and there's a bridge in Melbourne. Every time I go back to Melbourne, driving from the airport to my parents' house, there's a bridge we go over, and it's called the Bolte Bridge. And that is a bridge named after Henry Bolte, who was the last person in Australia to authorise, he was Premier of Victoria, and the last person in Australia to authorise a hanging, which
Mm.
actually happened way back in 1967. So by the time Eris was convicted, there was probably not a huge chance that he was going to be hanged. But my dad and I call the Bolte Bridge Hangman's Bridge.
Mm.
So it's a kind of grim way to enter Melbourne every time you go.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm just sort of saying that because it's what came to mind for me. And, Bianca's uncle facing the death penalty by hanging. So since 2020, Bianca has worked, and that was the date she finished doing a master's in architecture at Melbourne University.
Mhm.
Since then, she's worked as head of architectural design at Yeezy. No one's really sure how she got the job. As far as anybody knows, she had very, very little work experience. She had been an architectural intern at a company in Collingwood, Melbourne. But as far as anyone has published, at least, she'd never really had a paying job except for a waitressing job. By the way, her family must have been reasonably wealthy because they sent her and her sister to one of the most expensive private schools in Melbourne. It's called Carey Grammar. It's in the eastern suburbs, which are the leafy upper class
Mhm.
eastern suburbs of Melbourne. And its current fees, obviously they've gone up slightly since she was there, but its current fees begin at 40,000 Australian per year. So that's more than a lot of people earn. And that's just to send one kid to basic school without the extras, without the ski trips for 1 year. So this is a very expensive lifestyle. Um, the one project or sort of little bit of entrepreneurship that she did before becoming head of architectural design at Yeezy in Los Angeles was, very interestingly, I think, a company called Nylons. Was a
Mhm.
jewelry company. This
Mhm.
is way before she met Ye or Kanye. She owned a jewelry company called Nylons. It's easy enough to look up. And what she designed and sold was large pieces of kind of statement jewelry that were crystals wrapped in a fine mesh.
Mm.
And once we look at her aesthetic, which is a body wrapped in a fine mesh,
Mm.
it seems to me that she's in some way had this kind of aesthetic
Mm.
before she met Ye, which to me points to her not being a complete puppet, a complete, screen upon which his fantasies can be projected. So,
Is that what people say?
yes, it's one of the strongest things people say. So we'll get to that.
How did she actually meet? Yeah, was it
Nobody
Kanye?
knows, but nobody knows how they met.
She slid into his DMs.
I
Or
reckon he slid
she,
into hers. He's known for sliding into DMs.
yeah.
He's known for introducing himself to people via Instagram and X or Twitter, even to the degree of, for example, offering women he's never met in person, offering to pay for cosmetic surgery for them in order to make them more beautiful. It's not proven, but it's strongly rumored that he's done this. And she certainly had a very typical young woman's Instagram approach. That's a Freudian slip. A young woman's Instagram account with lots of sexy pictures and
The account is the approach.
indeed,
The medium is the message.
yes, indeed. The approach is the account. So, yeah, their marriage was thought to be in name only. There's enough, it's impossible to tell on social media what's leaked, what's official, what's real, what's staged, what's unstaged, etc. But I think there are enough kind of leaked videos of them in supposedly private spaces in parties or at dinners where they look extremely loved up. And so it does look to me like they are in love, they are really married. And for what it's worth, I think that's true. That's not really what we're here to discuss anyway.
Yeah.
He wrote on the 6th of January 2024, he put a picture up on, I'm not sure if it was X or Instagram, of himself all in black, huge black leather coat, of her virtually nude, definitely topless, with little strips over her breasts, but also with a kind of thrown back long black leather coat. He wrote, "Happy birthday to the most beautiful, super bad, iconic muse, inspirational, talented artist, master's degree in architecture, 140 IQ, loving by my side every day when half the world turned their backs on me, and the most amazing stepmom to our children. I love you so much. Thank you for sharing your life with me."
That's nice.
It was nice, wasn't it? And by the way, she says her Instagram accounts, if they're real, they say absolutely nothing. Her silence is a big thing, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But the point where she got really super famous, and there'd been quite a lead up to it, but the point was at this year's Grammys on the red carpet. She and Kanye rocked up. He was in his usual complete black, loose, everything covered, although he did have his head showing. Often he has a kind of helmet that or a mask that covers his face as well as his head. His head was showing, his face was showing. They turn up. She's all you could see was her high heels, stilettos, and a long, loose, thick black fur coat. They walked to the centre of the photographer's gallery. She turned her back. The photographers were screaming, as they do at anyone who stands there. They're screaming out instructions, turn, look at me, Bianca, look this way. And some of them are screaming, drop the coat, show us your shoulder. What have you got underneath? And she then has a little interchange with Kanye, which we can get to in a minute, a tiny little conversation, and then she drops the coat. And she really looks nude under the coat. She then turned, I'm not sure if she dropped it before she turned around or after she turned around, but either way, we see her front and back and side and side and front
It was
and back.
before she turned around.
Okay. And she looks completely nude, except that her body is a bit kind of pressed like a sausage, in a skin. So she's wearing this mini dress that's a slip that is made of a transparent, very fine mesh. This is not that unusual at the Grammys. right? We've seen all sorts of women celebrities in very similar gowns over the years. Couple of key differences. Hers had absolutely no embellishments. So I couldn't find another gown that had no embellishments. They all have sequins or crystals, usually in strategic places. So usually covering the nipples, but not always, and always covering the vulva, or what was spoken about in this Grammys moment by various slightly lovely coy commentators as her vajayjay, her meow meow, um, many euphemisms.
Various euphemisms,
And that
yeah.
was certainly a first. Another lovely euphemism that a friend of mine used was her sideways smile. Yeah, her sideways smile on display, and no embellishment on the dress whatsoever. Vagine is another one that people like to say. Her vagine, her meow meow, her sideways smile. But before this, there'd been a really interesting build-up. We saw Bianca in increasingly minimal outfits, a completely transparent, rather large raincoat with either nothing on underneath or maybe a G-string. It's kind of hard to tell in some of the pictures. A pair of pantyhose with no shoes and a kind of loose bra. She doesn't wear structured bras, she doesn't wear engineered bras. She wears these kind of loose, almost like a t-shirt kind of bra. You still get bounce, and
Yeah.
often they're quite sheer as well. Once she went out wearing pantyhose, high heels, and carrying a cushion, like a velvet sofa cushion, in front of her chest. And that was a great outfit because it was close to Halloween. And it was such a great outfit for people to copy for Halloween. It's basically free. Men did it, women did it, teenage boys did it. You just grab a pair of pantyhose, pull them on, grab a cushion off the couch, and go out, and you're in Halloween costume, and everyone knew who you were. So it was a fabulous Halloween costume. Lots of different outfits that included see-through stuff. But the Grammys were the first time, I think, that the world really saw her vajayjay for what it's worth. It's hairless. There's nothing there except a little line, right? It's the designer vajayjay. What is there to see? It's hard for me to see that this is anything really radical,
Yeah.
but there it is. Now, with all of this kind of exhibitionism, there's a silence. So she never speaks. She doesn't speak on social media.
Does she have social media?
She has LinkedIn, and she has an Instagram page that she only puts images on.
So she posts to it, or someone does.
Someone does, yeah. Yeah. People have said that this is a kind of Stockholm syndrome, that she is Kanye's prisoner, that he is an abuser, that she's under his control, that she's his puppet, that he's done this to other slightly less degrees, to different women, to Amber Rose, to Julia Fox, to Kim Kardashian. He's, masterminded their appearances. And that's certainly seems to be true. Other people have said, no, she knows exactly what she's doing, and she's actually making a very intelligent, informed commentary, political commentary on women's voices not being heard, on women just being bodies and not having voices, right? This is for the benefit of our listeners. Carla is rolling her eyes, which
Well, she could just also be not wanting to say anything
exactly.
on social media because, some people just aren't good with words.
That's right. One of the things I've thought is that if it is any sort of commentary, I mean, well, I don't know, but one of the things I thought was that in a way, she and Kanye are a little old-fashioned. They're kind of stuck in Instagram in a TikTok world. TikTok's all about talking and
Yeah.
they're stuck in the not talking. So that it's almost showing their generation. So the example of not talking. A Melbourne journalist who I think this tells us more about him than about Bianca, just as all of this speculation tells us more about the person speculating than it does about Bianca, all of this speculation about her silence. This
Mm.
Melbourne journalist wrote, "The reason Bianca Censori never talks is because she's from Melbourne. In a very literal sense, speaking in public would reveal Censori's Australian accent and all mystique would be obliterated. The Melbourne drone, nah, which means no, by the way, the Melbourne drone, nah, would be more revealing than a nylon garment could ever be." But I think that shows a lot of self-hatred by that journalist. Some people think the
True.
Australian accent's beautiful.
Yeah, but true, but just I'm looking at her images of her online as we do this and her Instagram page, and she just has a model vibe. That's kind of how she comports herself, and models traditionally don't speak. Like
And
it's
nor do
part,
artworks.
but
Kanye thinks she's an artwork, so
yeah, what? Well, he's got his own thing going on with
yeah,
her,
he's
and
projecting onto her as well, isn't
yeah,
he?
yeah. I don't think it's that weird that she doesn't speak because models, supermodels, never spoke.
I agree.
They lived in a time when social media didn't exist and they didn't really have to speak, but they weren't expected to.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, they just were to be
Exactly.
looked at
And is
and to
always a bit
pose.
strange when they do speak. I'm always surprised by what they say and how they sound. So, yeah. What we do know is that her silence is in very stark contrast to what I think of his
Yeah, he's
unhinged chatter.
psycho fucking babble.
Yeah. And it is kind of that's a good way to describe it because it often appears on X. There'll be post after post after post. They'll go on for several hours. By the next day, they've all been deleted, almost as if a minder's come in. Maybe the minder is
Maybe it's
Bianca.
Bianca.
We don't know.
I mean, hey,
But we do
baby.
know that her silence is in stark contrast to his unhinged rantings and chatter and his never-ending noise. It could be a way to keep herself safe. It could be a way to maintain some dignity, but really, we have no idea why. The
It,
interesting thing is that we all have different ideas about how she looks and why she looks that way,
mm.
and why she's silent and what that means. Now, post Grammys, immediately post Grammys,
My theory is that she's silent because she gets more attention that way.
yeah.
And that if she was to speak, you'd kind of realize that there's nothing particularly interesting about what she has to say.
So the silence kind of enhances the mystery,
Yeah,
which is intriguing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Quite soon after the Grammys, when I think all of the talk about her being his puppet and his prisoner and him being an abuser was really very, very prominent, she went out in a typical kind of, oh, what was this typical very loose top? You could see the shape of her breasts
Hmm.
through it, and a pair of underpants that I had to look up, and they're called dildo pants. Now,
Mm.
these dildo pants, imagine a pair of large undies a la Bridget Jones, right? Big, large undies. But then there's an extra layer on top on the front, and that layer has a hole
That
in
you put a
it
dildo through.
that you can put a dildo through, but that layer is reinforced and the hole is reinforced. The pants are designed to hold a dildo straight out, and basically for people who want to wear a dildo that they don't have to hold it or strap it on.
But they don't
Goes,
want to wear a harness.
yeah, yeah, that's right. So Bianca then, not long after all, during all this chatter about her being a prisoner, goes out in dildo pants. Now,
Mm.
there's just been no very little talk about it.
Yeah, no one's picked up on it. Like, is she
No
trying to
one
say
wants to
that
go there.
actually she's the one who fucks Kanye up the ass?
Exactly. Exactly. And you know that video you sent me of Amber Rose being interviewed by Shay Shay? On that video, Amber Rose is saying, "Oh yeah, Bianca's definitely, being coerced, etc. Kanye made me do the same thing. I had to go out virtually naked. I cried. It was horrible." But Amber Rose also talks about Kanye liking anal play for himself. And the interviewer, does this ridiculously coy, like, "Oh, don't say that. Like, I'm a big man. I can't hear about that. Oh, I can't hear about Kanye liking that." So there's this strange, weird coyness about,
Yeah, but it's homophobic. I mean, it's kind of fine
yeah,
to talk about the sideways smile, whatever it is. Like, it's normal for women's body parts to be discussed
yeah,
in those realms, but yeah, it's unless you're in a bubble of gay social media, it's very taboo to talk
yeah.
about straight men. Like, it's
Mm,
just a big taboo. Men are pretty sensitive about it,
absolutely.
especially because they actually like it.
Well, yeah. So it was interesting that here's Bianca with Kanye, he's always by her side,
Yeah.
wearing these dildo pants, and nobody really wants to discuss it. But maybe she's saying something there, maybe she's not. I don't know.
I just think they're both fucking with everyone
Well, yeah, they
and
definitely,
just getting as much attention as they can. I think
yeah,
Kanye goes on his psycho rants just to get attention and then intentionally deletes everything.
yeah,
It's about making money. They
possibly.
need they need an audience. They need their
Yeah.
market.
And he's certainly made a hell of a lot of money. Since marrying her, he has become a billionaire. And it's not because he married her, obviously, but it's because of all sorts of things, probably partly just inflation. I have no idea. But, he is now
Yeah.
officially a billionaire. The other thing that happened post Grammys was some sort of hint that Kanye will make the dress purchasable, as one of
Mhm.
his fashion lines. To me, that's hilarious because, God knows how much he'd charge for it, or maybe it would be cheap and so that everyone in the world could own one. But that to me is just really a case of the Emperor's New Clothes, of everyone paying to go nude.
Yeah.
Like
But
pay
it's also
Kanye.
that's fashion. That's the world of fashion. Like people pay a shit ton of money to wear stupid stuff all the time.
Yeah, but this is
That's
literally not wearing anything and paying.
Yeah, but there's also kind of degrees of that. I'm sure
Mm,
there are,
mm.
high fashion items where people are practically naked. Like this, it's just all a big advertising stunt.
Yeah, advertising the
We can't comprehend it because we're not of that world where the only thing that is important is making a shit ton of money
mm.
and where
Speak for
we need
yourself, Carla.
a ton of money would be good, but a shit ton. Do you know what I mean? Like
Shit ton is wrong.
it's just this kind of realm of high fucking bullshit.
Yeah. Well,
People will buy the outfit because they either want their girlfriends to wear it so
mm,
that they too can feel like they've got a big dick like Kanye with the most beautiful woman, or
mm,
because they want to be like Bianca Censori
mm, mm.
and, kind of feel connected to why else do people buy shit?
Yep, yep. All right, so it is really funny, Carla. And post Grammys, there were many very funny memes where the two of them were swapped. So where Bianca had been put in loose black garments and Kanye was in the mesh see-through.
Yeah,
Um,
that's pretty funny.
and it's always, as you know, I am studying to be a psychotherapist. And one of the things that one of my tutors always says is think of the opposite. When someone
Mhm.
makes a statement or when someone asks a question, think of the opposite. And so that's obviously what people were doing with these memes. But
Mm.
there are other ways we can think of the opposite to that Grammys moment of her basically standing there nude and him standing her next to her in the loose black garments. We could think, okay, the gender opposite is the first one that comes to mind, and everyone's done that. But what if we think about a racial opposite? What if we think about a white man and a nude black woman?
Hmm.
That, I think, would be controversial in all sorts of other ways. We have a long history, by we, I mean the whole of Western culture. We have a long history of white men displaying black women for money and for notoriety and for
Yeah, but
sometimes for medical uses. And the most famous of those is Saatchi Baartman, who was a woman kidnapped from Southern Africa, brought to the UK and displayed all across England and Europe as a kind of specimen, as a black woman specimen in, the most kind of appalling ways. And she's been written about a lot and somewhat reclaimed. She's just the kind of pinnacle, the most famous example of a black woman being put on display as part of a white circus or carnival or medical kind of experiment, etc. So
right, and was she put on display because of her race, the color of her
yes,
skin? Yeah, because I
yes,
think also women, white women, have been put on display by Western culture. I mean,
exactly.
maybe not. Maybe they need to have some freak thing like a third breast or whatever to be in a carnival. But
Yeah, or a beard or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, but otherwise,
But she was
page
put on
three
display.
of the
Yeah,
newspaper
exactly.
or
Yeah.
Playboy
Yes,
magazine.
the point I'm making here is specifically about race. If we imagine a meme that swapped their
Yeah.
races, we would have been doing something a lot more subversive than just those funny little gender swap memes. And
Mm,
not subversive, but also incredibly offensive
mm.
by today's standards. Imagine if we swapped it
But
into a non-hetero.
if it
Imagine if
was,
they were two women or two men. So
yeah.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that in some ways, and it speaks to your point of white women always being on display, in some ways, what they're doing is not subversive at all.
No. And also, she's on display as a kind of example of total beauty. Like, she's
Exactly.
not on
Imagine if she was
display.
fat.
Yeah, she's not on display as a
Imagine if she
freak.
had a mastectomy.
Yeah.
Imagine if she was old.
Yeah. So it's the dynamic of it isn't him necessarily. I mean, he needs to show off his women. That's what he's doing. And that's a
Exactly.
shtick that is very intrinsic to gangster rap culture.
It's kind of the
Like,
nude mobster wife, isn't it? But there is a name for a person who wants to show off their partner, often
mm,
in the nude, and that's candleist.
mm.
So if she's an exhibitionist, which she may be, he,
You'd have to say part of her is
yeah, maybe
willing
all
or
of her.
unwilling.
He's a candleist. So a candleist is someone who's aroused and stimulated by exposing their partner to other people,
Hmm.
either in private or in public. Yeah, so we don't know if she's empowered. We don't know if she's coerced. I don't think that's really the point. I'm not interested in that until she speaks and tells her own story. We don't really know, but she's an incredibly interesting public figure because in a way, if we talk again kind of psychoanalytically, she's what psychoanalysts might call a screen. So screens are objects or people or processes that often don't speak very clearly for themselves,
Hmm.
can be subject to multiple interpretations, and it's onto or into them that we can project our own desires, fears, fantasies, nightmares. So that's what Bianca is. I think
Yeah,
culturally she's a screen. Is
yeah.
she an abused victim? Is she the sexiest woman on earth? Is she an exhibitionist? Is she what she is to me personally is a newborn baby with breasts stuck on. That's what she looks like to me because of the Bambi eyes, the kind of vulnerable look, the hairlessness.
What does that say about you, Meredith?
Well, exactly. And
Yeah.
Carla, that is between me and my therapist.
And all the listeners.
and all the no, I'm not going to tell them what it means to me. That is just what,
They'll have to speculate with their own stuff.
yeah, they can, I can be their screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that the Grammys outfit made me think differently about was Kim's Met Gala outfit, were Kim Kardashian, of course, then we spoke about this
Mm.
on the podcast, her all black Met Gala outfit, the matte
The one,
black
yeah, like the,
coat.
yeah,
Because it made me think,
her shroud.
yeah, but it was a skin tight shroud. It made me think that that garment was like a pure cross. It was the thing in between Kanye and Bianca at the Grammys.
Do you reckon Kanye was having a go at Kim and saying, here's a better version of that outfit and her
That's what
body's more beautiful.
some
She's more
people have
beautiful than you.
speculated. Some people have speculated that, yeah. But if we look at that outfit, it's like Kanye's texture, if you like, his fabric, his matte blackness of his
Mhm.
clothing, Bianca's shape. And
Sorry, say that again.
so it's Bianca's shape, it's the silhouette, the
Yeah.
incredibly curvaceous hourglass figure, but covered in Kanye. So obviously this outfit for Kim was way before Bianca,
Mm,
but um, maybe Kim with that outfit was in some ways kind of in her divorce from Kanye, she was separating out from being his muse and his creation, and in some ways becoming like a cross between him and her own self that had been very similarly nude to Bianca. Not quite
mm.
as nude as Bianca, but similarly nude in previous
So
out.
Kim wore that outfit after she had divorced Kanye.
They were certainly separated. I don't know if they were
Okay.
divorced yet.
Okay. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I mean, to a
Well, I thought
degree.
we'd have a bit of a chat about pantyhose. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah,
So, as
let's
I
do
said,
that.
it's one
Let's
of the weirdest words in the English language, don't you think?
sort of. Hose in German means trousers.
Interesting. So, hose,
Like hose in German. That's not how you say it, but it
yeah,
means
Hose.
trousers
Ah.
or pants.
Yeah, it's a leg covering. And in English, hose means a tight leg covering. It's not
Mm.
used anymore, but we still have hosiery departments in department
Mm-hmm.
stores. Um, so it used to be that hose, which were socks or leg wear or trousers in Germany, had to be knitted or made of fabric, or and if they were knitted and stretched, they would be knitted out of cotton or wool or silk. Silk were the really expensive ones. Um, and they weren't connected to panties, right? They had to be held up in some way. And they were often held up with these rather unwieldy garments called, what were they called? Suspender belts
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
garters
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. Anyway,
Yeah,
things with
yeah.
hooks, which again have taken on their own fetishistic identity, probably post pantyhose, because
Yeah. Before that
pantyhose
they were
made them
normal.
obsolete.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so pantyhose, that this idea of joining the panties to the hose, but also about the hose no longer being made of some sort of fabric that was natural, that was silk, wool, cotton, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but was now could be made of nylon. And
Mm.
the early name for these garments were nylons,
Mm.
hark back to Bianca's first business.
Mm.
Um, so it's really a nexus of three really interesting technologies: the hose themselves, which are ancient, the panties themselves, which I guess are kind of ancient, but then this tiny, thin, fine microfiber, which is nylon, and which crucially was cheap. Everyone could have it. So then whoever had the idea, it was some man, I forget his name, to join panties to hose. Apparently it was because his pregnant wife couldn't keep her hose up or something. He invented pantyhose and they were first sold in the late 1950s. And they've become everyday. They're cheap, but they're also glamorous. There's hardly any difference between a pair that you might buy from Primark or Target and a pair that you pay a fortune for from a European designer. You really can't tell the difference. They're strange, small, relatively inexpensive, kind of quintessentially feminine things. A lot of my trans women friends talk about their first feminine purchase being a pair of pantyhose. They're affordable and they're obvious. Me as a teenager, when I was first sort of acclimatizing myself to the language of the international language of the department store, I'd go in, look at hosiery, look at perfume, and look at makeup. Couldn't afford much of it at all. What I could leave with was a pair of tights or a cheap version, a cheap object from the perfume stand, which would usually be a cake of soap, not the perfume, but the soap. And what was the other thing? Oh, a lipstick, a red lipstick. These are kind of quintessential feminine things that any femme of whatever gender can go in and relatively easily purchase. So there's something really fascinating about pantyhose. They're also soft but incredibly strong. They ladder really easily, but you can't destroy them. Like as soon as they're laddered, you can use them to tie up your tomatoes, make a hairband out of. They don't biodegrade. They're ruined, but they're forever.
Yeah. But they're so uncomfortable and they're so synthetic. I always found it really annoying wearing them. We'd have to wear them to school,
Yeah.
or it was one way of keeping your legs a bit warmer.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have to wear them like in summer to cover our legs. But yeah, the whole notion of them, it was kind of like, why would you wear this that doesn't even, like, it still looks like you've got bare legs. But okay, so you're covering them. So that's some kind of etiquette thing. But then they're just this nylon, uncomfortable, sweaty,
Yeah. Well,
annoying
this
layer.
idea of the kind of nude look, like it's paying for nudity, pantyhose can be the same color as your leg.
Yeah, that's what they were originally.
Yeah,
No?
but
Yeah.
it's not your leg. So there's
Yeah.
something really, really intriguing about that. I prefer tights. I would never, ever wear a so-called nude pantyhose. To
Mm.
me, that's just ridiculous. But coloured tights, yeah. What about the breathable gusset, Carla?
I don't even, what is that?
The gusset's the bit that goes under your
No,
vajayjay.
what's the breather? Like it's got holes in it.
I don't know,
Like,
it's made of cotton or something, and
okay.
it meant you didn't get sweaty.
Yeah,
But there are people who pay a lot for a worn pair of pantyhose in the fetish world.
right,
Where you wear them for a day and then sell them for a small fortune.
right.
Yeah, but that's another whole world, and I
Mm.
deliberately didn't go there.
Do you know what else they're good for,
What,
pantyhose?
what, what?
Preventing jellyfish stings.
Oh, yeah. Surfers wear them in the water.
Yeah, so also long
Yes,
distance swimmers who need to swim through Portuguese men of war.
absolutely. A friend of ours, Carla, you know her as well, was recently stung by a blue bottle
Okay.
in Sydney. Yes. She
That
should have had
friend
her pantyhose on
shouldn't have had pantyhose on.
in the water. And of course, we can't talk about pantyhose without talking about Skims. Kim Kardashian's
Oh, she's,
massively, it's really why she's a billionaire, is her line of
is this the
underwear,
weight
which is
IoT?
called Skims, which is based on pantyhose technology, but which is used to sculpt the body.
So hold on. She's made her fortune. Kim
Mm.
Kardashian made her fortune with this product made out of pantyhose or whatever.
Same sort of technology, yeah.
And now Kanye's wife is on the verge of launching her own pantyhose fashion brand. What
Possibly.
that includes
Well,
dresses and who
all
knows
we
what
know is
else.
Kanye's intimated that the dress might be on sale,
This is just
versions of
like
the dress.
this is just like They're probably going to have a reality TV show soon, or some reality TikTok show.
Well,
It's
that'd
all
be
just
interesting because if she was on
marketing
reality TV,
exercise.
so I think she'd have to speak.
No, she wouldn't.
Maybe not.
No, she just wanders around with her fucking naked pantyhose on.
The first silent reality TV show
Well, other people could
with
speak.
Kanye ranting in the background.
Yeah, like how often do characters on screen actually speak? There might be one person, like not everyone speaks at once.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. Who knows? Maybe a reality TV show will be next for Kanye and Bianca.
She can let her body do the
I
talking.
really want to know what is next for her. I'm really, really interested because where can you go in terms of being a visual display after complete nudity? So we'll see. We'll see. One thing we do know from his various rants and from things he said to other people is that he, at least on some level, thinks that this is performance art.
Sure. But he
Now,
doesn't do it anywhere other than in front of all the fucking cameras. So sure, it's performance art, but it's also marketing. It's guerrilla marketing. Like,
yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I have immense respect and a long fascination, like decades long fascination with artists who work with pantyhose. So Louise Bourgeois is probably the most famous of them all.
mhm,
Her sculptures that are stitched together hosiery.
mm,
Often it looks used and old and stained. She stuffs it so it becomes kind of misshapen. She sews it together into kind of hybrid, humanized
yeah,
forms. She sticks it with pins. It's twisted and
yeah.
bulbous.
It's quite grotesque.
Yeah, and it's
A bit
like,
a bit like the substance monster.
indeed, indeed, yes. And then other feminist sculptors who've worked with pantyhose, all of whom, of course, have been, I think, heavily influenced by Louise Bourgeois. Sarah Lucas,
Mhm.
whose works Honey Pie, Sugar, and Bunny were all on display at the Tate in a retrospective. And I'll put a link up to that. Her stuff is amazing, her stuffed pantyhose sculptures. Polly Borland, a Melbourne photographer who did a series of photos of people and things stuffed into pantyhose in various
Mm.
ways. And the series was called Morph. I'll put a link up to that as well. Shirin Fakim, who did incredibly disturbing and moving sculptures made out of stuffed pantyhose, simply called Tehran prostitutes. And I'll put a link up to that as well. So all of these feminist artists use stuffed pantyhose as a medium to make social and artistic and political commentary about women's bodies, about femininity, motherhood, aging, ugliness, beauty, and the grotesque. And to me, they are all so compelling. And something that Bianca's doing is related to them. And I think, well, I know, I'm sure, that the missing link between Bianca and them is this artist called Vanessa Beecroft. Now, Vanessa Beecroft has worked with Kanye for many years, usually behind the scenes. She's an Italian artist, a performance and installation artist, and most of her performance art and installation art consists of what we would describe as very mainstream, beautiful models, supermodel type women in the nude, standing in a group. Very often they're wearing pantyhose, sometimes they're wearing bras, and they stand in galleries, in groups, in various different sort of configurations, etc., colours, all that sort of thing. Vanessa Beecroft has worked with Kanye at least since 2008. They've created fashion lines together. She's directed some of his music videos. And in fact, some of her sculptures, not her living sculptures, as far as I know, but some of her inanimate sculptures were on display at Kim and Kanye's wedding. And so here I am thinking about all of this and thinking about Bianca. And then lo and behold, Kanye reveals that he has paid $25 million to produce a film directed by Vanessa Beecroft, starring Bianca, shot in Japan, yet to be released.
Maybe she'll speak in that.
No, it's had a premiere, but it's still unavailable and she doesn't speak. It's called
It's her shtick.
a fashion film.
Yeah, it's her shtick.
25 million.
Well, it's marketing.
25
Like how many million are they going to make off the back of it?
He wrote all caps, "I'm so proud of my wife for starring in her first feature film shot in Japan, directed by Vanessa Beecroft, produced by me." There you go.
That's what you can do with $1 billion.
Yeah. I spoke to, there's probably about 3 or 4 professors of gender and cultural studies in the UK. I'm one of them. I went to an exhibition with one of them. She asked me what I was doing, and I told her that I was working on this thing to do with Bianca, and she didn't know who Bianca was. And I explained to her and showed her a video, and she said to me, "She's just showing off."
Yeah, yeah.
And I just loved that.
Yeah.
But what is she showing off exactly? You know,
her body, the way
yeah.
her body conforms to convention. I mean, she's beautiful. She does have a beautiful body and a beautiful face,
Well,
according to
interestingly to
convention.
me, she's not.
Right. Well,
But yes,
in terms of
yeah, mainstream beauty, yeah.
what convention says.
Yeah.
And as I was looking at some of her pictures just now, a lot of what she's wearing when she's not in the nylon or the pantyhose, it's activewear. And
yeah.
activewear is like fashion now. That is what fashion is. That is what people wear as their actual outfit.
That's right.
And so she's just bringing out a line of fashion. Why else would you make a $25 million movie with yourself as a center if you're not about to launch a product?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we will see. We will see. The wonderful fashion theorist Betsy or Elizabeth Wissinger wrote way back in 2015, after, in fact, watching Kim Kardashian, Beyonce, and J-Lo's outfits at the Met Gala, all of which were skin tight and see-through, but as I said, embellished. She said that the body is the new fashion and the body is the new couture, so that instead of tailoring our gowns, the new status, the new Uber status is to tailor our bodies. So, yeah, can we all have couture bodies? No, a couture body costs a lot and relies on luck, the same as a couture gown does. You need to be lucky enough to afford it, and then it costs a huge amount. What Ye wrote immediately post Grammys was, and this was in response to all of the negative feedback, she been dressing naked for 2 years. Now all of a sudden it's a stunt. Every single bitch on the planet wishes they had her bravery, body, platform, and access to money, and a husband that supported their personal expression. There are a lot of things that had to converge for this moment to happen. I read that
Marketing. Like it's they're just selling something. It's a copywriting.
I mean, it's
good.
In a way, it's true. Like every single bitch on the planet wish they had her bravery. Well, I don't know. Her body, some people do. Her platform, some people do. Her access to money, that'd be nice. And a husband that supported their personal expression. Lovely.
Yeah.
It's just his rants are funnier the more you read them out, except obviously not the anti-Semitic ones, amongst other ones. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of hilarious. What you were saying, though, about they do it all in public, right? That's really interesting. And also, you began this podcast by kind of saying the medium is the message, and their medium is paparazzi, right? It's not just photography, it's very specific kind of photography. These kind of garments, you could call it leisure wear, you could call it fetish wear, you could call it, or even kind of only for Instagram wear, right? One of the things Bianca and Kanye are doing differently to all of that, all of those parts of this fashion for showing off the couture body, is they're taking it into public, and they take it into the everyday. Like, she wears just a pair of pantyhose and a loose fitting bra to buy a piece of cheesecake. A lot of people have a lot of Instagram accounts that show them just as nude as Bianca.
Yeah.
But they don't go to buy a piece of cheesecake dressed like that.
Yeah. I guess they're not as brave.
So she does, maybe they're not as brave. Maybe they don't have a husband who supports their personal self-expression, Carla.
Yeah, or maybe.
Yep. So what next? I don't know. I keep thinking about extreme exfoliation. I think, okay, she's hairless, she's nude, she's exfoliated, she's shiny. Maybe she'll next have no skin. Where do you go after this?
You just launch like a fashion label.
Yeah, but that's just in the same. So there's nowhere to go. That's just in the same.
Well, there'll be some other way of being outrageous if she needs to be. But
well, we'll find out.
The latest plateau is
we'll find out. What
sell
I
her
really liked, I
fashion.
want to kind of finish with something I really liked. So I was thinking, can we do art and fashion and these kind of new couture bodies in ways that are actually beautiful and somehow meaningful and symbolic and evocative? And along came Julia Fox,
Oh, yeah.
one of Kanye's exes.
Yeah.
She had a brief dating history with him.
Yeah.
She dated him immediately post his split with Kim. And this year's Vanity Fair after party, the one I think that is hosted by Elton John, she wore this draped dress made of tulle instead of the sequins or the sparkles or the glitter being placed in strategic places. Usually it's all, it's to cover nipples and vajayjay or meow meow or sideways smile. She had hair, and it was inset into the dress. Her own hair kind of came down, wrapped around her a little bit. Then it was joined by these hair extensions, and they kind of wrapped around and covered different parts of her body. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. She looked like images of Mary Magdalene, medieval images of Mary Magdalene, the figure in the Bible who went nude, who went to live in the desert, and whose hair grew and grew and grew down to her feet, and her hair was her only modesty. So go, Julia Fox. Thank you. Thank you, Julia Fox.
Did she have pubic hair?
I think her head hair covered where the pubic hair would be.
Hair would have been if she had.
Yeah.
Any. Okay. Well, there you go. That's where it has gone.
I know. Maybe I'll grow my pubic hair super long.
So long
and
that
wrap it around upwards instead of my head hair coming downwards, and create this kind of modesty. I might have to get pubic hair extensions, Carla, to do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Are you brave enough?
Is my husband supportive enough of my individual self-expression?
Well, only one way to find out.
It's true.
Why do I like Julia Fox so much more than Bianca Censori?
All I know is what they wear. And I think what Julia Fox Wears is 1,000 times more interesting.
She's also a bit more vocal. She has a personality and she's brat.
I've got a feeling Bianca has a pretty big personality.
Yeah, probably.
She has an IQ of 140, according to Kanye.
So do you.
So do you. I looked it up. It's not genius level. I mean, he says he's a genius. I wonder what he thinks his IQ is.
Good God.